Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I'm reminding you now, like I always do, to grab that notepad and a pen so you can take some notes. I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down an action item, something that you will implement in your business today to drive your business forward, because that's what it's all about. Now, today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a case study. I want to give you an example. I think there's something that you can learn from a conversation I had recently with a manager who runs a team, a smaller team, an organization that does business to business sales, technology related. And in our conversation, he was going through his results of the previous month, and he had projected that he would do a little bit better than he expected to, and he was flat, but he had projected some growth. And so I think we can discuss that, you and I, without me giving away any details that would be unprofessional and that he would consider to be proprietary or confidential. And maybe we can learn something about this. And I think he took away something, I took away something, and I thought I would share that with you. So the first thing is, I commend the individual for having some performance analytics that we can go through. And the other thing that he did right was he was projecting. As I mentioned, he was projecting an improvement, a fairly significant improvement from my perspective, and yet he ended up flat. But the commendation should be that he was taking the time to analyze and predict and make a projection that he would improve. And the first place we started was with that. And what was it that made you think you would improve? And he actually did improve his revenues and his profits, yet he was a little bit suspect of the data that was on there. And that's the next lesson, is he had his finger fairly close on the pulse of his revenues, and he thought that there might be something missing from the report we were going through. And we were able to confirm that, in fact, some of the work in progress that he had and some of the work that he had completed was not falling into the time frame that he expected. And so the first thing there was that was unique to him. That was a new experience for him, to understand the importance of making sure the reporting lines up with your projections. And in particular, what could he do with that information? He can now work with accounting and work with the people that his customers and everything, to make sure that they close out and he makes his collections on time and everything, so that his revenues fall into the right reporting period. Now, he had no danger of losing any revenues as a result of this. So in his case, the silver lining is, okay, well, some of what I was expecting, some of what I was projecting in terms of growth is just going to fall into my next month. But there was a management growth moment for him there, to realize that what he thought was at variance with what was being recorded in accounting and what was actually happening in terms of money exchange. So that was the first thing that maybe you can take away. So ask yourself, do you know where you're going to be next month? Have you taken the time to make some projections projections are an educated guess, and you can look at your history, you can look at what sort of things are coming down the pipe in terms of revenues and that kind of stuff, and then make an educated guess, a projection. Have you taken the time to do that for a year out? Have you taken the time to do it even for a month out? And if so, are you projecting growth? Are you projecting to be stagnant? Or you project like flat, as this individual turned out? He was fairly flat month over month. He actually took a little tiny bit of a step backwards in terms of his overall performance, what we would refer to as report cards. And you notice I did say that his revenues were up. In fact, his profit was up, and yet we call that flat, because the way he measures his overall performance is also about growth in other areas, not just simply revenues and profit. So are you looking at this stuff in your organization? Anyway, one of the things that he commented to me early on was that he had already made the determination that he was going to spend some money on paid advertising, specifically digital advertising. So pay-per-click advertising, or what we refer to as SEM, or search engine marketing. Commonly, you would think of that as, Google ads, that, somebody does a Google search and then you see the sponsored ads at the top, those text-based, and there's display network ads and all sorts of things. There's of course Facebook ads. These all fall under the heading of search engine marketing and pay-per-click advertising. And so anyway, he had made the determination that he was going to do that, and I said, oh, okay. So the next principle here was, I want to explore his way of thinking, why he had decided to do that. And I shared with him that throughout my management history, we've always said, you can always throw money at a problem. And we say that in a way to indicate that that is not necessarily the best approach. In fact, that should be what you do when you have a really strong foundation of projecting that will improve the problem that you're trying to solve. But it's far too easy for managers to get in a bad habit of throwing money at problems, because there are very predictable things you can do, such as advertising. And I will share with you that marketing can be a money pit if you're not careful, if you don't use database analysis to make sure that you're spending money in the right place and really analyze that and tweak your strategy as you go along. But there's many areas of business that are like that. And just throwing money at a problem can be the bad thing to do. And so I said, okay, well, you're going to throw some money at this problem and that may solve it. Let's analyze why you've made that determination. And it wasn't that it was just off the top of his head. He had drilled down and looked at what was going on in his organization, and he felt that he was not getting enough web traffic and that he did not have a large enough customer count. He needed to do the things that will lead to growing his customer base, and what's upstream from that is growing his number of leads. And to him, that meant, well, I'll spend some money on advertising to drive traffic to my website. And so the next thing we did is we analyzed that. I said, okay, well, that might be a good thing, but let's do this chronologically. Let's think about what conditions need to exist to make sure that that is a very predictably good decision that you're making. And the one thing, I'm gonna kind of work it backwards like we did when we were talking. I said, do you have the information as to what are your web analytics? How many people are on your website, and your conversion, your traffic? And we explored that a little bit, and without getting too much into that, it turned out that the information he had handy at his fingertips was too general for me to be able to make a wise recommendation to him, and too general for us to conclude whether spending money was on paid advertising was a good idea or not. And so we looked, and he was able to, then he tried to pull up another report and drill down a little bit. And I said, okay, well, those are some things you want to look into a little bit before you actually authorize the expenditure to your marketing people. Make sure that you have that information. And he had a member of his team that was providing him this data on his performance analytics, on his report card that he was sharing with me. And it was commented that person is going to get the drill down data and get more specific data. And this was the next comment that I want you to come away with, maybe make a note on. I said, okay, well, that's good. That's really good. And don't forget, the speed with which he does that will help us to react very quickly in this business to try to make sure that we make the proper responses. In other words, I used the example, if it takes him 6 months to make that improvement, then it's going to be a long time before we have the necessary insight to know whether or not your strategy is good or not. And yet, if he does this tomorrow, if he gets that information to you over the next week, now we can react accordingly. So when you are analyzing your performance analytics and you realize that there's information you're missing that's imperative for you to make wise decisions, try to get that fixed as fast as possible. try to get that information as fast as possible. Make that an action item and get to work on it immediately. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark again. You're just guessing, and we don't want to guess. So it was encouraging to me that he had somebody on his team that had gathered the data that he and I were going through, and he could go to that person because he's busy, he's got a lot of projects on the go, and he wasn't going to be able to do it himself, but he had somebody who could delegate that to, and he could make that happen. So you got to make sure you have the relevant data. But anyway, while we were sitting there, we were able to do sort of a manual count, and we were able to ascertain that, at least in both of our estimations, the web count was much smaller than what he'd like to see. And so you would think maybe then that we could conclude that, oh, some paid advertising might make sense. Some pay-per-click and SEM driving people to your website might make sense. But hold on, not yet. We can't make that decision yet. We're gonna keep diving in a little bit deeper and go through the sort of what I said was the customer journey and the conversions that they go through to ascertain whether or not that's a good decision. So I then said, what about the traffic you are getting? And that's sort of, I got to backpedal here a little bit. That's where we realized he wasn't sure on the spot in our meeting where that traffic was going. It was too general, the information, and that's what you need to know. You need to know when they're visiting your website, are they converting to the page, which is likely going to generate into conversions for revenue? Are they not even going there? Are they somewhere else on the site? Unless you can see exactly what your customers, your prospective customers, i.e. your leads, are looking at, you don't know where the problem exists, where they're bouncing is what it's called. And so we needed to understand that a little bit better. And then we can do some A/B testing once we have that information. The next thing I looked at is I started to describe to him where you could do a bit of a test. I would limit the amount of money you spend right now because you are lacking some information. But if you want to get started, you do have a count for a more general count of how many people are ending up on your website, and you're just not exactly sure where they're going and where they're bouncing. You can spend a little bit of money right now, but I would limit it just to see, does it have the desired effect? But before I even recommend that, I said to him, what about the quality of your website? What about the quality of your pages? And what we did was we did the analogy of a store. Your website is your virtual store. And I said to him, think about the most successful retail outlets, maybe those most popular retail outlets. So we used the example of an Apple store. And Apple does not spare any expense in making sure they have this vibrant retail environment in which their customers. Now, of course, Apple has very robust e-commerce platform and website, and they can sell everything through that, and yet still they have retail outlets. So, they operate in both. My particular, the person I was dealing with was, of course, operating only in e-commerce world, but I used the analogy of the retail store and we used Apple Store, but I digress. Anyway, I said, think about the experience that somebody has when they go into the Apple Store. There's plenty of knowledgeable people there. They call them geniuses. I wouldn't necessarily think that's accurate, but anyway, there is a vast array of products. People can sample and try out. People are knowledgeable that can answer questions. I said, now when your prospective customers, when your leads end up on your website and they're exploring your products, what experience do they have? Are they greeted friendly? Do you have a chat option? And is that chat option automated with a bot, or they're live agents? Is it likely that people bounce from that? Do you have that data at your fingertips right now? And I started to paint a picture. You could see the eyes opening a little bit wider and him going, yeah, okay, I need to know that. I don't know that information off the top of my head. And those things really give you an indication of your customer experience. So I then asked him about the value of his services. And I mentioned to you earlier, these business to business services. So I said, think about your customers and what it is that they're looking for. And what are the constituents of value? And I recommended to him that he watch my video on value and the 4 constituents of value, and then start to brainstorm the various ways that he offers value. Now, he can do that for two reasons. One, he can try to innovate and offer more value, but at the very minimum, he wants to know how he's currently offering value and then reconcile that with the message that his customers receive on his website. Remember, that's his virtual store. So when you go into, in our analogy, in our example, the Apple store, there's people there that are explaining to you the benefits and features of the various products in there, and they're allowing you to try them out and that kind of thing. And I asked him to try to imagine what are his prospective customers experiencing. What does the copy on the website say about his services to instill confidence in these other business owners that may decide to take advantage of his services, that they've found the right purveyor of those services for them. And you could see the wheels turning. And he mentioned to me that he's upgrading that. He's actually in the process of creating a new, not an entirely new site, but new pages, new product and service pages and video and other content to help deliver the message to the customer. I said, okay, so what you're doing here, let's just go back to what your first comment to me about spending some money was, is you want to advertise to drive people to your store. That would be the equivalent of Apple putting out, maybe a billboard or some kind of advertisements and saying, hey, we've got a great store, come to our store and check us out. And people arrive at the store and they're understaffed, they don't have people to help you, they don't have their inventory ready, their products aren't in place, and nobody can actually convince the customer that there's great products there that they want to buy. I said to him, right now, if you're unsatisfied with the value proposition presentation on your website, on your virtual store, fix that before you spend any money. Why would you want to drive traffic to a store that is likely to have people bounce? If they're gonna have a bad experience, not only are you not gonna convert them, but they may, you're damaging your brand. So that was really where we spent the focus of our conversation, is looking at the chronological logic of what your strategy is going to do. And it all comes back to that data. And so the next time he and I meet, we're gonna have a little bit more data in place. He's going to have some upgraded analytics, and he's going to have renovated, so to speak, his store, his virtual presentation, and his website, so that we can see whether or not this makes a good decision. The other thing I mentioned, I just bring it up quickly in passing here, is he talked about customers, which I distinguished between customers and leads. He did have some customers that he thought there were revenue opportunities for that he could go back to. And remember that your existing customer base, growing your revenues and your profit comes down to adding new customers, which is known as conquest, or retaining your existing customers, increasing like through reorders, you get your revenues up, or increasing the order size from your existing customer database. So he also took an action item away there, that was someplace that he saw there was opportunity. So don't get too hung up on this concept. Remember, advertising, throwing money at this particular problem would be about conquest. What about your existing customer base? Are there opportunities there? And he thought, oh yeah, there is an opportunity that I'm missing out on here. And that's, as you all know, it's far less expensive to gain business, to gain $1 of revenue from your existing database of customers than it is to try to conquest new customers. So that was the other point we took away from that meeting. I just wanted to share this sort of, like I said, a mini case study with you. There might be a few more points that he and I discussed. It was a much longer meeting than we have time to discuss in this video. However, you can see by stopping what you're doing, taking time out of working in your business to work on your business, and speaking, join our VIPs group or something like that, where you can do this kind of thing. VIPs group stands for Vitality Index Peer Support Group. And so the Vitality Index part of that is your report cards. And then you can meet with peers who are non-competing, and you guys can share ideas, and there's a very high level of accountability with one another to accomplishing those action items that you've set forth. from one meeting to another, from one group session to another. But you need to look at your business and ask yourself, what are you doing? Have you got your projections in place? Do you have some sort of performance analytics report card that you can reference? And then that's where everything starts. You can see where looking at that and evaluating it with other people, all of a sudden you create these action items to drive your business forward. He admittedly would be stuck working on a lot of other projects, and yet he's forced to take this time out to look at his business, to create some action items, to make wiser decisions based on not just his own conclusions, and make the business better. And that's what this is all about. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. There's a lot we could talk about on that. And as I have more of these types of discussions with business owners, managers, entrepreneurs, and I think I can share those with you, and that there's lessons for all of us to learn from, I'll definitely create more videos with these sort of mini case studies. And yeah, but in the meantime, if there's some areas you'd like clarification on, please ask questions in the comments, or if there's something that I stated that you disagree with, or that you firmly do agree with, or whatever, leave a comment, because the comments are a way that we can learn from one another, and we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.